r/AskReddit, Tour Guides of Reddit. What's the worst thing a tourist has ever done under your supervision? I work at a brewery taproom and take people on brewery tours. During fermentation, CO2 is produced and excess comes out through a runoff a pipe and into a water bucket. One of the attendees, who was being a pain and trying to be funny but nobody was laughing, asked me what the pipe was for, so I gladly explained. He then asked what would happen if he breathed it in. In disbelief of his stupidity, I told him he would pass out, damage his brain. He then proceeded to grab the pipe and take a breath. He was then ejected and barred. Some people are just beyond belief. Former whitewater rafting guide. There's a calmer section of the river people can, if they choose to, hop out and swim through. They are wearing life jackets so you can just float through it. This woman decides she wants to try it and hops out. After she pops up, she slowly tilts forward until just the back of her jacket is out of the water and she's completely still. After 5 or so seconds of this, I start to realize this might not be intentional and paddle over and physically pick her head up above the water, followed by her gasping for air. I haul her in the boat and ask what happened. She said she didn't know what to do as she'd never been submerged in water before. 1. Why are you on a whitewater rafting trip? 2. Why didn't your strategy involve moving your body? On an open-top tour bus in London, woman tries to dangle her toddler over the railing, then starts saying she's going to complain to my manager when I told her to stop. Caught her doing it again, and company policy said that anyone endangering their kids like that was to be removed from the tour. So the driver had to come up and march her off. She still insisted she did nothing wrong. Like, she literally had the kid's feet on the side rail of the moving bus and was just holding him loosely round the waist. One low-hanging tree branch, of which there were many on the route, and that kid was gone. Not me. My best friend's tour guide on an island off the Australian coast. He saw one of the tour ignore the huge signs warning people not to go to the edge of the water. Predictably, the tourist gets hit by a huge wave, swept out to sea. I know it was the worst thing the tour guide ever saw because he and my best friend both went into the sea to rescue the tourist. And they both died. Funniest guy I ever met. Miss him most days. The tourist who caused it all? Predictably, he survived. Pretty sure he doesn't feel too good about the whole thing. My cousin is a tourist guide and biologist. Most of his tours are in Africa. He instructed his group of 25 people, including kids, not to wear any type of earrings or collars, especially shiny stuff, since they were about to go into a thick forest to try to see a bunch of animals. This is very important because 2025 make a lot of noise, which makes wild animals run away or hide. It's even worse if they're wearing shiny stuff they can spot from far away. Okay, so this woman complains, decides to wear shiny earrings anyway. Cousin tells her to get rid of them or she ain't coming with the group, so she obeys but puts them on a bit later. Some species of monkeys in that area love shiny stuff. They ripped the earrings from her ears. I wasn't the tour guide, but I was on a tour of Namibia and had a Zimbabwean guide who was telling us his craziest stories. He had a couple that was married who were on their honeymoon who were on one of his trips. One night, everyone is sitting around the fire and chatting, just as we were, and this couple gets up to go to the bathroom. This is a campsite, so they walk off into the darkness towards the toilets. A few minutes later, the guy runs back alone, crying and panicking. Everyone asks him what happened. I think my wife was killed by a lion. Gasp, shock. Everyone is freaked out, asking him what happened, and as he's trying to explain, the now irate wife walks up to the campsite and starts yelling. So what had happened? Well, they'd walked off, and at some point near the toilets, they both heard a kind of snuffling noise in the underbrush, clearly an animal rooting around. The husband completely freaks out, pushes his wife towards the noise and down to the ground, screams, and runs away. Spoiler alert. It was not a lion and the wife was not pleased at the attempts at being sacrificed. The guy told us that they didn't speak the entire rest of the trip and he believes they got divorced. Hilarious. TL, doctor, don't shove your wife into the ground if you think there is a hungry lion in the underbrush just to save yourself. I worked at a living history farm museum. I had a kid that was climbing on stuff the whole tour in the farmhouse and trying to get behind the smith in the blacksmith shop during a demo. After the tour, when people are allowed to roam the grounds, I hear his mom screaming and look over to the barn and this kid has climbed the fence into the field with our longhorn oxen and is trying to poke them with a stick. I walk over and calmly told him to get out of the field before our lazy oxen decide they've had enough. But this jackoff decides to look me in the eye and smack Ted on the ass with the stick like it's a riding crop. Ted, bless him, just kinda jumps a little and whips his head around with a WTF dude look on his face. But seeing as he's a longhorn, he just wipes this kid out with one of his horns when he turned his head. Kid goes flying into the dirt and is having a meltdown. Mom is freaking out. I'm like, dude, get the hell out of the pen before Ted actually gets mad. So this kid is crying and trying to climb the fence out of the field and Bill, who has been watching this whole thing, waits until the kid is almost over the fence and walks up to him and nudges him in the ass with his nose and pushes him off the top of the fence. It was everything I could do to keep from laughing. Kid was fine, Ted was fine, but the kid and his mum were promptly kicked out of the museum. Their dad and little sister were allowed to stay because she was well behaved and was just enjoying petting the goats at the petting zoo. So since the kid had to leave but his sister didn't, there was a temper tantrum in the parking lot that could be heard all the way to the other side of the farm. But the oxen got some extra grain that night, so I guess they won in the end. I was working on a tourist island in Australia when this man pulled out almost all the back feathers of a peacock because he wanted to keep one. He sneaked up behind it, and grabbed a huge handful and yanked them all out. He was immediately escorted off the island. The peacock had a huge bare patch and most of its beautiful feathers were gone. Frown. We're pretty good at stopping tourists from doing too much damage. After being in the industry for a while, you get a spidey sense for when people are going to do dumb things and can often steer them away from doing anything too bad. That being said, here's one of my favorite stories to tell. I was 7 months pregnant and it was the week before I went on maternity leave. I was driving out to one of our sites and to get there I had to drive, on the road of course, through our penguin colony. This particular species of penguin burrows underground and stays hidden in their burrow during the day, and comes out at night when birds of prey and other potential predators have gone to sleep. As I'm driving out to the site, I realize the parking lot up ahead is full and people have started parking up and down the road. And that's when I see a giant SUV pull off the road, drive between the bollards and into the penguin colony. I pull over as what seems like 20 non-English speaking tourists start to pile out of the vehicle and take selfies with the ocean backdrop. Staying as calm as possible and using sign language, I point out the no entry signs of the bollards they drove past. The burrows they have just collapsed, inform them they may have killed penguins, and to get their effing vehicle out of the fucking colony. Once I got them out of there, I started digging out the collapsed burrows to check for penguins. The first 4 were luckily empty, but the last one had a breeding bear. I get the girl out, check her over for injuries, and having nowhere else to put her, I follow protocol and tuck her under my left arm against my side. I get the boy out and put him in the same position on the right side and start to check him over. Remember how I said I was pregnant? Well, normally, you hold a penguin down low almost on your hip, but because of my round tummy I was holding him more at the bottom of my rib cage. So when I turned my head to start my health check, the bastard reached up and grabbed my top lip with his beak and ripped straight through the middle. It was about this time that the tourists walking along the road realized this ranger was holding on to 2 penguins. I had 5 or 6 tourists sprint through the colony towards me and start snapping pictures, while at the same time potentially collapsing more burrows. If any internet sleuths stumble across a picture of a heavily pregnant, pissed-off-looking ranger holding 2 penguins with blood pouring down her face, let me know. I've been waiting for that picture to show up for 3 years and haven't found it yet. Happy ending. I chased away the photographers, popped the 2 uninjured penguins in a nearby unoccupied burrow, and radioed for backup to help with the parking situation. My lip healed without a scar, and both penguins left the following morning for a well-deserved day in the ocean. TLDR signatures there for a reason. Rules are there for a reason. If you don't know what the reason is, doesn't mean you should break the rules. Edits. Real TLDR tourists drove over penguin burrows. No penguins were harmed in the making of this story. Just glad people seem to appreciate the work we do with these super cute, vicious, and smelly animals. They're worth every ounce of blood, sweat and tears. They took a big crap in front of the group. So, we tour through streets and parks and make it really clear that the toilets at the beginning of the tour are the only ones for the first 90 minutes of tour. We get to a park about 30 minutes into the tour. Not a big park, mind you. It is basically a big roundabout with a swing set, bench and 2 trees. I'm in the middle of my spiel in the park when I see a guy at the back of the group step away, pull his pants down and squat on the grass. Of course I was stunned and lost my flow, which had everyone looking around only to recoil in horror as this guy drops a lock like it was nothing. He wasn't even ashamed. During my summers in college, I worked as a raft guide on a whitewater river in the southeast. It wasn't a difficult job. The 2 biggest things we were responsible for were running our trips in a timely manner and ensuring that the guests in our boat had a fun and safe trip down the river. The safety part is important, because people visiting the river frequently forget that it is a natural wilderness feature and carries all of the associated dangers. We frequently received questions about whether the rafts were on tracks, whether I actually had to do anything in the back, and, my personal favorite, whether the river went in a circle and we would end up back where we started. This last question was particularly funny because we took a bus from the rafting outpost to the Putin of the river. Why bother if we were going in a circle? One summer afternoon, I had a boat with 3 groups of 2 people. One of those groups was a mother and son. The mother seemed nice, if timid, as did the son. However, as I was going through the routine of explaining the safety concerns and paddle commands, it started to dawn on me that he was not very bright. There was nothing wrong with him, he was just dumb as shit. Once we were on the river, he almost immediately developed a habit of checking the depth of the water with his paddle. He would incessantly plunge the blade into the water without care nor concern for his surroundings and circumstances. The water on this river is pristine, almost crystal clear. The riverbed is visible almost constantly, and still, this young man felt the need to verify the veracity of his own eyeballs by shoving his paddle into the river like some sort of deranged perpetual motion machine. Of course, I warned him against his actions. At first, my concerns were that his depth checking interferes with his ability to follow my commands and paddle. Eventually, however, my pleading grew more desperate as it dawned on me that this child paid no deference to my authority. He answered only to chaos. It finally came to a head when, in a portion of the river that was extremely shallow, probably no more than a foot deep, he plunged his paddle into the riverbed with a force that shook the surrounding countryside. Like Excalibur, the paddle wedged itself among the rocks, perfectly erect. The boy, with a staid iron grip that could only be wielded by someone incredibly dense, kept his hand on the paddle as the rushing water carried us away from its new location. In one swift motion, he was wrenched from the raft and landed in a foot of water. He wore a face of bewildered idiocy. It was quite satisfying to keep his paddle in the back with me for the remainder of the trip after I returned him safely to the raft. All he could do was stare wistfully at the riverbed, his poo brain longing to verify its depth. I was on a tour with my family in Cambodia and we visited Angkor Wat. Now, as everyone knows, Angkor Wat is teeming with tourists day and night. There was a long line to climb the beacon, basically the topmost tower, wherein the steps are very steep. It was a hot day and when it was almost our turn, a middle-aged man took 2 steps, fell backward and started having a seizure. People came to his help immediately. However, one man who was also crowding around him did nothing but pull out his cell phone and start recording. Thankfully, everyone noticed and started yelling at the guy to put that shit away. He acted like the victim though and he said he was just trying to help. What at what? Edit. People are saying the guy was probably filming it to show paramedics, but A, the victim's family was there and if anyone had the right to collect evidence, it's them, and B, recording dude was grinning widely until he was called out, so I seriously doubt he had good intentions despite his claims. Was on a tour of a small cave system somewhere in West Texas. It was really beautiful and right after the guy told us how long it took for all the stalagmites and stalactites to form, she turned around to move on and some guy leans way over and snaps off a small one and shoved it in his pocket. I was so surprised I just stared at him and he smiled and winked at me like we had really gotten away with something and I was a co-conspirator or something. I used to work at a heritage site. It was an old military installation with a lot of remaining original structures, bunk beds, cafeteria equipment, computers, etc. Every day it was a constant effort to remind people, kids, not to jump on the beds, not to slam doors open, not to punch every button like it owes them money. The absolute worst was a group of kids on a school trip. Within the first 10 minutes we're walking through the tech portion of the exhibit, where we had a wall lined with Burroughs Large Systems machines, B5000s, all behind this little fence about waist high. I turned to demonstrate some of the pieces, and when I look back at the group, one of them had jumped over the barrier, opened one of the units and started pulling out handfuls of digital tape from the reels inside. I just about jumped on the kid when their teacher did just that. She jumped the barrier, smacked the kid's hands and took him outside. I immediately ended the tour and had them all refunded, as I couldn't imagine what else could happen. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you were at all entertained, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing for future content. Stay safe everyone, until next time.